Rhetorical Quest.
We're going to talk today about one of the most central aspects of communication, and that is language. When we talk about language, we're talking about so much more than just a central aspect of communication. We're talking about something that is at the very essence of what makes us human. We can talk about communication as something that exists in really even at the plant level, right? Or even even microbes have ways of getting information to each other. But language is really different. Here at WNMU, where I teach, we have 4 questions that are supposed to guide everything that we do here. What is truth? What is justice? What does it mean to be human? And what is the good life? And this question of what does it mean to be human? Well, for those of us who take a rhetorical point of view in communication, the answer to that is it means to be human that you use language. Now, like I said, all kinds of animals communicate, but there's a big difference. The difference is that human beings communicate symbolically. Symbolically means where one thing stands in for another thing, where a concept is wrapped in a word or in a picture, and when it becomes wrapped in this other thing, then we can use this thing as if we can use this symbol as if it were the thing, right? So I can say words and we can talk about building a doghouse, right? And we can talk about where we'll get the wood and where we'll get the nails and where we'll get all these things. And by the time we're done having our conversation, we can have a pretty good idea of how we're going to build this doghouse, right? Because when I say the word nails, it stands in for actual nails. And we can talk about, well, this is what we'll do. We'll measure it, and we can even draw up pictures, and pictures are always symbolic. So this is what's really different about the way that humans communicate, and really every other earthly thing communicates, is this use of symbols. Now, because language is symbolic, it's necessarily abstract. The symbol is never the thing. Alfred Korzybski was a man famous for saying, the map is not the territory, right? That there's always going to be a difference between the symbol and the thing. And because of this, there's always going to be this level of abstraction. Now, we can use symbols that are less abstract. Like I said, we talked about drawing a picture. You can draw a picture and it's a little less abstract, right? We can look at this escalator here on the side and you can see that it's an escalator, even though it's not really an escalator, right? This is pixels on your screen shining different colored lights at you. But we can have a pretty good idea that if you saw wherever this photo was taken in real life, it would probably look a lot like this picture. So that's what we can say language is more abstract than pictures, right? It's one of the most abstract symbolic tools we use. And this is useful. Because language is abstract, it allows us to categorize things, right? So it allows us to think of things in terms of categories and things that it fits in, right? So I have this image over here to the right? And so we could go up what we call the ladder of abstraction. We can talk about Jerry Garcia, guitarist for the Grateful Dead, right? Was once, now he's dead. I wonder if he's grateful about that. Anyway, we can go up the ladder of abstraction and say, okay, a little bit more than that, he is a rock guitarist. Okay, a little bit more abstract, he's a guitarist. A little bit more abstract, he's a musician. And a little bit more abstract, he's an artist. And a little bit more abstract, he's a human. And this is good because I can talk about what makes us human, right? Our ability to use language is our argument generally about what makes us human. As a species, there are individuals who can't use language, but as a species, we use language, and that's something that makes us human. And so we can talk about what makes somebody human. Whereas if you don't have language, you can never get to the abstract levels like that, right? You can only deal with what's here and what is and what's present and what happened and what you saw. We can move up. We can say certain things are true in general of humans. We can say certain things are true in general of artists. And we can know that if something is true in general of artists, it's probably true of Jerry Garcia because he is an artist, right? Or was an artist, right? So we can put these things in there and say, it goes up. There are things that we can say about all musicians. All musicians study music in one way or another. We can know that about them, right? And so we can talk about people in terms of magicians too, but musicians. We can talk about guitarists, right? This is what and then we can talk about rock guitarists, and we can make these general categories and talk about things according to those categories rather than getting down to the specific. Now, this is good. This is really, really good because it allows us to syllogize, which is the idea of creating logical categories and saying because something's not part of a category, it probably fits in. It probably has the parts of that category, and so we can do that. We can look at categories and go out logically. Things like advanced mathematics, right? Really advanced mathematics, a lot of it's theoretical. It doesn't actually apply to anything that actually exists. But we can deal with it in terms of numbers. And then if we come across a problem that really exists and we've dealt with it in terms of numbers, in terms of symbols, then we can actually deal with it. But we may never do that. We can tell fictions, right? That are things that never actually exist. But we mostly find fiction to be useful. We mostly find fiction to be something that helps us with the world by taking something and pulling it into this world where there are dragons and talking monkeys or whatever, and then developing principles in the fiction that then we can bring down into our own world. This is amazing. But there's also a problem in abstract language. My wife, for instance, might say to me, go get me a drink. So I go over to the sink and pour her a glass of water and bring it to her. And she's, I don't want water. She says, well, what do you want? And she says, well, I don't know, something fizzy. And so I'm like, I go to the fridge and I see that we have drank all of our pop, our soda, for those of you in urban areas or New Mexico. We drank all of our pop. It's all gone. And so I go back to her to say, I don't think we have anything. She says, well, yeah, I wanted you to go to Sonic. So she told me, go get me a drink. But what she meant is, go get me a Diet Cherry Limeade from Sonic. That's what she really meant. But because she used more abstract language, we had all kinds of issues going on, right? And so a lot of times the problem with abstraction is you've got something very clear in your head, and you said that thing, but a person understands something else because something else would fit into the categories that you used. And so this is something we have to watch out for in abstraction. Language is rule governed, and we call the rules of language grammar. Now, maybe you hear that word grammar and you immediately have nightmares about semicolons or something like that. But here's the thing, that's the grammar of writing in school. But grammar is any kind of socially agreed upon rules where the purpose is how we can put together abstractions in a way that makes sense to other people. So different groups have their own unique grammars. The ways in which language is rule governed has brought some people, specifically would probably think of Ludwig von Wittgenstein, a philosopher, thinker, communication writer, who have talked about language in terms of language games, right? So you know the rules of the game, you're able to participate in that game successfully because you understand the game. And so he talks about language games. And so we could also talk about the grammar of school. There's a particular grammar that you use when you're dealing with your instructors. Just when you send an email, when you talk to them on the phone, when you show up in their office. That's not necessarily the same as the grammar you use with your friends or even the grammar you'd use in a formal paper. And so this grammar of school allows you to properly negotiate school. When we talk about the struggles that first generation college students have, one of the struggles that they have is they have never been inculcated. That means kind of brought into the culture of. They've never been inculcated into the language game of school. So, in addition to learning the things that they have to learn in the university, when they're first generation, their parents didn't go to university. When you have people who haven't been inculcated into that culture by their parents, not only do they have to learn everything they have to learn for their degree, they also have to learn a whole new language game that's different than other language games they have to play. Where there's always going to be a language game around your work. It's one of the hardest things when you come into a new job, is that there is a grammar of work. There's a way people talk about particular things in that particular workplace. Your family certainly has a different way of talking about things and the ways in which we can mean things and stuff like that than probably other people do. The symbols are different. Your faith is also, there's a language game around that, right? So that you use certain phrases, certain symbols in order to bring across certain things and play the game in a way that makes sense to the other people who are already playing the game. I already mentioned research. When you write a research paper, it's different than the school language game. It's this whole other way of writing. Even if you're talking to me, if you come by my office and we have a chat, and if you're one of my students, we're probably not going to cite sources a huge amount in just our conversation. But when we start to do research, then we have to be really precise about our citation, and that's part of the language game, right? So everything has this language game, and producing things, you have to play the game properly. Part of the reason I don't always like this term of the language game is that games imply that it's all fun and it's all that, but no, language gets things done. If we look at Austin's work on the speech act theory, right, we can understand that language allows us to accomplish something. The classic example always given is that when two people are married, they are declared by their faith community and by the government and by whatever other things that declare them married, and then they are, right? You are married if you're married, and you're not married if you're not married. And people can say, well, I don't need a piece of paper to show that I love. No, you don't need a piece of paper to show that you love. You also don't need a piece of paper to be really smart. I'm making these videos. You can watch them on YouTube. You don't have to be part of my interpersonal communication 400 class. You can watch these videos, and especially if you read the works cited that I put below them, you can do all of that. You won't get any college credit. You won't get a degree, but you can know this stuff. And then if you try and go out into the world and say, I understand some things about communication, well, how? I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Because they want you to be declared socially as part of a speech act that you have a major, a minor, an emphasis in communication, right? That there's this degree. And can you know all the things in a degree without getting the degree? Yes. There's absolutely nothing that's taught at any university that you couldn't learn with a YouTube subscription and a library card. Nothing. But you want to be declared as educated so that people can accept you as educated. And once you're declared, you are. And people will treat you as though you are because it's been declared. So the whole point of all of that is you want to play the game in such a way that it does the work. So what we're going to talk about now are some things that you can do in your use of language that will make the game do the work better for you. So sometimes we have language that gets in the way of doing the work, right? It stops us from actually accomplishing what we want to accomplish in our communication. One thing that can get in the way of doing the work is when we start to confuse facts and opinions, right? So if I argue that the world is round, that's a fact. It's not just my opinion, right? And the difference between facts and opinion is variable. I've never, been to outer space and looked down at the world. I trust people who have told me that. But they told it to me as a fact. They didn't say, the world seems round to me. Opinions are things that we think. And because we believe certain things, we sometimes treat them as though they were facts. And that can cause all kinds of problems. We can also confuse facts and inferences. I think this video right here in the middle is a good example, or the picture, I guess, in the middle is a good example. We see a woman there laying in bed, and the fact that the bed is so clean and the walls are so clean and she's wearing makeup and appears to have had her hair brushed in a particular way, I would infer from this that this photo is fake, that it's staged. I don't think this is how that woman or anybody really sleeps. And so because of that, I think it's fake. Now, I might be wrong about that. Maybe I'm even wrong that she's wearing makeup. I don't really know that. It just looks like it to me. And so, because of that, it might be real. And so I have the fact. There is a picture of a woman laying in a bed. That's fact. It's staged. That's an inference that I can get from the information. Another thing that gets in the way of our language doing work is when we use emotive language and use it as fact. Now, I don't necessarily think it's wrong to use emotive language because it can be persuasive. But when we use emotive language as fact, and we look at things and say, we get the speech here where the man gets up to speak, and that woman sees it as patronizing, arrogant, abrupt, and the guy sees it as forceful, confident, and clear. The woman gets up to speak and sees it as gutsy, outspoken, strong. The man sees it as pushy, obnoxious, shrill. When we do something like that and we describe something using emotive language, we're really talking about our feelings regarding it and not what it is. And so a lot of times we need to be careful and not use emotive language if we want to use the language to get some work done. And so One way that we can really use less emotive language, or at least not use emotive language to describe others, but rather to describe our feelings, would be to use I statements rather than it statements. Maybe you're watching this video right now and it's frustrating to you because you just think this is a stupid video. Every reasonable person already knows these things. So you could say that it's a stupid video. Now, avoiding it statements like that is a certain way, you can take responsibility for it by saying, I'm not intellectually stimulated by this video. And then you go a lot further. Or, it upsets me when I see you playing video games when I have to work. Okay, that's how it is, but that's not really how it is. You're really talking about yourself. And so if you take responsibility, you say, I am upset when I see you play video games when I have to work. Not that it upsets me, but that I am responsible for my feelings, my actions. And so I am the one who is having this feeling. It's not forcing a feeling on me. Another way we can have language that works a little bit better is to avoid using but language. When I was a student, an undergraduate student in communication back in the 90s, we were actually taught that this was good, that we should use something called the sandwich method, where we say something positive, you're cute, but you're psycho. But, I really enjoy your time, right? That this would be better, where you take the criticism in between two slices of compliment. We call it the sandwich method, and it was seen as best practices in communication. But further research has looked into this, and it's really not very good. It tends to counteract the good that we say. So you probably should avoid this if you want language that works. Another thing that we can do if we want language that works is we can try and avoid you language and instead use I language, so that you're taking responsibility for your feelings and your emotions and what's going on. So what does that mean? A person could say, you don't listen, but and that makes it an accusation. Instead say, I don't feel heard. Take the responsibility for your feelings and what's going on in yourself. You need to take the trash out. Well, you know what? I'm not really feeling that need right now. I think that I could let it. No. It's not you need that. I need the trash taken out. And I would like you to do it. Right? This takes responsibility for your feelings and what you want on yourself instead of pushing it out onto somebody else. You lied to me. I don't think that was the truth, right? It's the same thing, but in one case you're making it an accusation, and in the other case you're taking responsibility for what you see. You drink too much. Okay. I really think that a 12-pack a night is drinking too much. Well, see, it takes the responsibility back on yourself. I know that there's probably people of all kinds of religions and faiths watching these videos, but one of the things that we talk about sometimes in Christianity is that Satan is the accuser and the Holy Spirit is the convictor, and you're not qualified for the job of the Holy Spirit and don't want the job of Satan. You don't want to be the one who accuses the other person. And so instead, you take that responsibility onto yourself, and your language will work better. Using we language is another thing that can really help your communication work better and accomplish the work that you want it to do. And so what do we do with we language is we say, we need to work on this, right? This is a problem we need to solve. We're running late, not you're making me late, not what's going on with you people that makes us late. We're running late. We should see that movie. We should pick up some milk. And when you do that, you're making a person part of your community rather than taking a superior stance of ordering somebody to do something, to say, we've got things to accomplish as part of our unit, as part of our communication dyad, and we might assign particular tasks, but that's because we need it done. And that idea of we kind of comes into more just in general. We should probably try and use more inclusive language. Now, sometimes we set up language intentionally. We want to exclude somebody. And, we need to have boundaries. So sometimes exclusion really is necessary. And that intentional exclusion, where I am going to use words and phrases that exclude you, sometimes that's necessary because we want to exclude certain people, and it's intentional. And sometimes that can be bad, but sometimes it can just be about keeping healthy boundaries. So you don't always use inclusive language. A lot of times, though, when we use language that's not inclusive, we didn't even realize we were doing that. We're using language that makes certain people feel like they can't be part of our community because we have disenfranchised them in some way. I remember the first person I ever met was in a heterosexual marital relationship, and it was John Warren. If you want to look at it, he's a famous communication researcher, one of my mentors, and he died. But anyway, he referred to the woman with whom he was in a heterosexual marital relationship as his partner. He says, me and my partner, me and my partner. And when that happened, I have to admit, in all honesty, I just rolled my eyes at it. I was like, oh, come on, your wife, right? This is silly. But the more I've thought about it, the more I thought, what he was doing there was he wanted to make sure that the way he talked about things included people in non-heterosexual relationships so that they could understand that we are all a part of something. And in a way, that was really, really beautiful. Now, I'd really like to hear from you. I'd like to hear how you have maybe made some changes in order to come to language that works, right? And to understand what ways you've learned to play the game to make the game do better work. That's some things I'd like to hear. If you're one of my students taking my interpersonal communication class, go ahead and talk about that in the discussion prompt below. If you're just somebody who happened upon my video on YouTube, or maybe you've even subscribed, that's awesome of you. In that case, I would love it if you would just go ahead and write in the comments, how this kind of information has worked for you or helped you or something like that. Thank you very much for watching.